Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll start. Thank you, Akhil, and the organizing team of Varanasi for giving me this opportunity. So today's talk is on concurrent chemotherapy, and we will be focusing on the options of treatment in cisplatin ineligible patients. Now, I don't have any conflicts to disclose here. Now, whenever we look at cisplatin ineligible patients, the definition of cisplatin ineligible has always been quite of a gray zone area. There was not a clear-cut definition until 2016, when an predominantly Asian medical oncologist, along with Dr. De Cruz, Dr. Varmorkan, took this task to heart. And in 2016, in oral oncology, the first publication came of what is cisplatin ineligible and what is eligible. Subsequent to that, there have been multiple consensus guidelines which have come, not multiple actually, altogether till morning today I could find on PubMed only 3, including this one. So these two, one came in few Frontiers of Oncology, and this is in print in Future Oncology, and all are republishing the similar things. So we will restrict to these two guidelines. Now, this would be the flow of presentation. Let's first discuss what do we consider as cisplatin ineligible and why do we consider it as cisplatin ineligible. And this discussion we could find elaborated in this publication which came in Oral Oncology. And let's look at the factors. Now, when you look at this, interestingly, this panel of experts decided that there are certain relative contraindications and there are certain absolute contraindications for cisplatin ineligibility. Poor performance status, increased biological age, a create clearance which is low, presence of hearing impairment, neuropathy, in general, markers of well-being like hepatory, respiratory, cardiovascular dysfunction, if it is to a large extent, which we would classically say as uncontrolled comorbidities. If the patient has HIV/AIDS, but the CD4 count is below 350, if there is weight loss of greater than 20%, patient is pregnant, patient has previous platinum therapy, or patient is receiving concomitant use of nephrotoxic drugs. So gamut of conditions were given, and this have been consistently given in all 3 guidelines of as a relative and absolute contraindication. Now, with due diligence to the expert sitting and who made this consensus, I actually think these contraindications which were given as absolute contraindication for cisplatin are actually absolute contraindication for giving chemotherapy in most of the situations. Like for example, if the patient requires definitive CTRT and his performance status is 3 or 4, most of the oncologists would consider that for palliative radiation, would won't be considering patient for any kind of chemotherapy. If the patient has a grade 3 or more or a Child-Pugh score C of dysfunction, these patients would be considered for any kind of chemotherapy, rest apart cisplatin. If the patient has life-threatening conditions such as uncontrolled systemic infection and is requiring CTRT, he won't be given any kind of chemotherapy. Leave apart cisplatin, and the same would be in the first trimester of pregnancy or if the CD4 count is 200. So for me, these classifications was actually theoretical. In general, most of the medical oncologists or practicing clinical oncologists in this situation won't give any kind of chemotherapy to this patient. This patient will be subjected to most of the times palliative RT or best supportive care, in fact. And so we would have to more focus on these kind of conditions which were considered as relative contraindications, what we need to do in these conditions. Now let's look at each of them and why probably this panel decided on this. Let's go at age. This is from the McKenzie analysis. This is from the 2009 paper which got published in Radiotherapy and Oncology. What it shows is that the benefit of cisplatin or benefit of concurrent decreases as the age increases, and in fact, as the age increases, the absolute benefit actually goes in negativity. The reason for this was that is because of an increase in non-cancer related deaths. And what the discussion is that a biological age of the patient should not be considered. You're good at geriatric screenings. If the geriatric screening scores are okay, you can still consider the patient to receive some kind of chemotherapy. But a high geriatric score definitely excludes the patient of receiving cisplatin. Similarly, a performance status 2 or 3, these patients don't benefit from, at least didn't benefit in this McKenzie analysis, which was predominantly the benefit which was from cisplatin, and hence these patients were considered as cisplatin ineligible. What about hearing loss? And this is from an old publication of Dr. Varmorkan, which talks about percentage of ototoxicity, cumulative dose of cisplatin, interestingly, along with different lines for patients with different ages. You could see that the tolerance of children to cisplatin is much better. However, as the age increases, the tolerance decreases. The reason is most of the patients, as the age increases, they already have some pre-existing ototoxicity. And on the basis of this, it has been suggested that patients who have pre-existing ototoxicity, for them, giving cisplatin leads to hearing loss. Now, the question comes, and which is very relevant, which most of the people are obsessed with this. If you don't give cisplatin, the survival will be low. What if the patient survives but has hearing loss? The problem is patients who have hearing loss have a detrimental impact on the quality of life, and most of the times they are not functional. So what it has been suggested by these experts is patients who don't have, would have functional losses, which will be debilitating, would also be considered as a contraindication for that drug. And hearing loss is a classic contraindication for giving cisplatin. The same thing which I have shown, that as the proportion of hearing loss increases, the braceband loss is there. There is a high increase in the cisplatin related hearing loss. Remember, cisplatin related hearing loss is irreversible, and it just keeps on accumulating, which means that it is going to go on and increasing as the patient ages further, and it is not going to reverse back. Interestingly, one of the criteria which they gave was presence of weight loss at baseline. We might suggest, okay, what harm it does. There's limited literature on this, because if you see most of the studies who are done with CTRD excluded patients who had 20% or greater weight loss. A few of them were courageous enough to do chemoradiation this, and one of this paper from Capuno describes such patients. Now, whenever this paper is quoted, it has been suggested that the cisplatin given here was high dose. The cisplatin given in this study was 5 milligram per meter square given for 6 milligram per meter square given for 7 days. So actually the cisplatin given was very less. It was in the weekly doses of around 35 to 40 milligram per meter square. In spite of that, if you see that near patients who had 20% or greater weight loss, within 12 weeks of starting treatment, nearly 35% of them lost their lives. Which means that 1 out of 3 patients has the risk of losing its life if the patient has a weight loss which is of greater than 20% at baseline. So let's look at these criteria again. This is what I suggested, that the point I have highlighted in red are those criteria for which you may not consider giving any kind of chemotherapies. So we would be focusing what treatment options to be done in those patients which are called relative contraindications. That's where I differ from what this paper has suggested. I think there are contraindications for cisplatin. They're not relative or absolute. These absolute contraindications are for contraindication for any kind of chemotherapy. And let's look at this publication, which came from Dr. Varmorkan in 2019 in Frontiers, which talk about what are the options which we can give to these patients. And let's look at these options with respect to definitive chemoradiation. So please understand, Dr. Varmorkan's paper gives options in patients who have absolute contraindication cisplatin, but you won't be giving any kind of chemotherapy patients with Child-Pugh score of C, PS3, with trimester. So these are more or less hypothetical. These options should be looked into for relative contraindication. For definitive chemoradiation, patients who have who will be treated radically, the option is listed as carboplatin 5-FU, followed by cetuximab, followed by carboplatin. We would have a look at in details with each of these options and what we need to do for them. For patients who receive in adjuvant setting, the first option enlisted is cetuximab docetaxel, carboplatin 5-FU, cetuximab alone, or carboplatin alone. Let's have a look in detail about each of them. Now, why do we give concurrent chemotherapy? It's because it leads to a survival benefit. It leads to an absolute survival difference of 6.5%. This is for all kinds of chemotherapy together. If you look at with respect to only cisplatin, this goes in the range of 10 to 12% OS benefit. When you look at it, that the 5-year survival, if you don't give, is 27%, and it jumps by around 6%. This is relative 25 to 30% increment in the survival, which is there. So let's look at the options. And first option will come for carboplatin and 5-FU. This slide is from the supplementary appendix of McKenzie analysis, which got published in 2009, and gives in details about What were the trials which looked for carboplatin and 5-FU? These are the 3 trials, all done by the French group. If you look at this all trials always took oropharyngeal patients, never took patients who were receiving adjuvant chemotherapy. It was standard to give them carboplatin and 5-FU. And as in 9301, the dose of 5-FU was 1000 and it was intolerable to even cisplatin eligible patients. It was decreased to 600 milligram per meter square. So the dose at present is carboplatin 70 milligram per meter square into 4 and 600 milligram per meter square into 4. 3 weekly regimen is this. Now let's look at the most prominent paper of this, 9401. What we need to understand that carboplatin 5-FU was given in cisplatin eligible patients. It was given in definitive chemoradiation patients. And patients who had weight loss, patients who had low creatinine clearance, patients in which we would consider them as cisplatin ineligible were actually excluded from the study. So this option of carboplatin 5-FU was not as a substitute for cisplatin in cisplatin ineligible patients. It was as a substitute for cisplatin in patients who were eligible for cisplatin. And that's what we need to understand, that carboplatin 5-FU, as is shown in this graph, is a highly toxic regimen with 60% of the patient getting patchy mucositis, 44% of patients getting wet discombination, nearly 40% requiring feeding tube support, and this in cisplatin eligible patients. You can just think about the toxicities if you try this regimen in cisplatin ineligible kind of patients. So what we must understand is that though carboplatin 5-FU theoretically looks to be a good option, it may not be an option in cisplatin ineligible patients because these patients' tolerance would be very limited. Consider this fact with the DYPD status which the Indians have. This is our own data. Consecutive patients, nearly 25% have a DYPD deficiency in TMH dataset. We increased this dataset to 1,200 patients. Again, 25% of the patients have DYPD mutation status present. What does that mean? Giving 5-FU in Indians is a difficult prospect. In fact, I'll tell you, at present in TMH, we are running a study of cisplatin 5-FU and cetuximab. One of the generic brands of cetuximab is doing this study, and we're a part of this. And what has happened is there has an amendment been put because there have been multiple deaths in this study already because of 5-FU related toxicities. Now the sponsor wants in all Indian patients to get a DYPD status done and patients above 60 years not to be recruited because he feels that there is unnecessary high amount of toxicities in Indian patients. What this tells you is that DYPD is there in India and it's quite common. So carboplatin 5-FU as an option, according to me, in cisplatin unpatient patient is rarely usable. Let's go to look at the next option. Even in adjuvant setting, according to me, is rarely usable. In fact, there is no data to support that it should be used in adjuvant setting. Let's go and look at the next option, which was docetaxel and cetuximab, which is given as a first option for adjuvant patients. Now, docetaxel cetuximab came from this RTOG study, RTOG 0234. You would be surprised, this study again was not in cisplatin ineligible patients. This was done in cisplatin eligible patients, and it was done as a 1:1 randomization for docetaxel versus cisplatin. In both arms, cetuximab was given. So cisplatin plus cetuximab, docetaxel plus cetuximab, and the comparison was done. And it won't be a surprise that this treatment, even in cisplatin eligible patient, was pretty toxic. 60% having grade 3, grade 4 mucositis, 40% having dysphagia. Interestingly, this study did show that docetaxel plus cetuximab is better than cisplatin plus cetuximab. What I'm trying to stretch here is that in cisplatin ineligible patients, doing a combination of docetaxel plus cetuximab in adjuvant setting will not be a combination which we much well tolerated in most of the patients. So according to me, for me, this also gets a negative point. Let's look at cetuximab study, the famous study by Dr. Bona, in which patients were randomized to RT or RT plus cetuximab. Again, this study was restricted to cisplatin fit patients. The study included only patients who were cisplatin fit. And that's the reason why this has now dropped from NCCN. That's the reason why cetuximab was labeled as a category 1 regimen in patients who also could have been given high dose cisplatin. So this was not a substitute and as an option developed in cisplatin ineligible patients. It was developed as an option in cisplatin fit patients. Now, can we give cetuximab in cisplatin ineligible? patients. And this was seen by our senior colleague, Dr. J.P. Agrawal in TMH. And understand, cisplatin ineligible patients have tendency to have a very poor prognosis. 2-year DFS of 30%, disease-free survival at 29.5%. What we saw that nearly 80% of the patients cannot can receive only 6 or more cycles. So 20% cannot complete the cycles of cetuximab. Grade 3 or more toxicities are seen in 40% of patients, and mucositis in nearly 25% of patients. Overall, seems to be in general toxic, but can be given a regimen. So yes, it gets a yes from me for definitive chemoradiation. But as I showed you, there is no data for giving cetuximab alone in an adjuvant setting. It would be at the most extrapolation of data. Now, what about carboplatin as a chemoradiation cisplatin unfit patient? It's commonly given regimen. We used to also commonly give this in TMH, and we found that, yeah, it is pretty well tolerated, weekly carboplatin, and gives you an respectable outcomes. Now, let me flash you back to another phase 3 study called TROG study, in which carboplatin alone was given as an adjuvant. So one arm received radiation, another arm received radiation for carboplatin. You fail to see the separation of the curves, suggesting that even in cisplatin fit patient, carboplatin was not associated with benefit over RT alone. This is again echoed by Dr. Vermeuken in his one of the manuscripts, where he says that carboplatin is frequently interchanged as a substitute in patients who are cisplatin ineligible. However, it should be noted that use of carboplatin plus RT did not result in an OS improvement versus RT alone. So I'm not sure that we do replace many a times carboplatin agent with cisplatin eligible patient. Whether it benefits in terms of overall survival to the patient, it's a question. In fact, in a McKenzie analysis, this was the platin which didn't have a survival benefit. So for me, definitive chemoradiation with carboplatin again gets across based on the evidence which is there. In adjuvant setting also gets across. There is actually a head neck adjuvant study which shows that it does not benefit. Now, do we have any research specifically done for cisplatin ineligible patients, or each time we have to go back to cisplatin eligible patients and do that data? I did a search, and this was done today morning. Up till today morning, with this measured, only 39 articles have got published, and many of them are repetitions. Let's look at some of the things which got published this year. This got published in August 2020. And this is what I was suggesting, that just because cetuximab and radiotherapy was well tolerated in bonus study in cisplatin eligible patients, it does not mean that it will be well tolerated in cisplatin ineligible patients. This answer was answered in this phase 2 study, low risk HPV positive oropharyngeal cancers, single arm study. One cohort was in eligible, one was in cisplatin eligible, evaluating cetuximab and radiotherapy. You could see that the cohort B had to be closed because of excessive toxicities, 60%, and the 2-year DFS was also 37%. The conclusion that cetuximab treatment endangered poor outcomes. Rate of severe toxicities were on par with platinum-based resistance, suggesting cetuximab is not a benign treatment, especially in platinum ineligible patients. So that's a word of caution which is now there, that cetuximab, though we think that it might be better tolerated, at least in studies prospective done, it doesn't show to be as good tolerated. Do we have something coming up in immunotherapy? I came across this publication, came in August 2020. Only pembrolizumab given as 200 mg every 3 weeks during concurrent, followed by 3 cycles of adjuvant. Interestingly, this was well tolerated, and this also crossed the benchmark of success which was put in the Simon one-stage design. So something to look forward. What's the ongoing research in this? So there are 3 major trials which are going on with immunotherapy. One is nivolumab versus cetuximab in cisplatin ineligible. Another is avelumab being tried in cisplatin ineligible. Another is durvalumab being tried in cisplatin ineligible. All these trials are subjected to come with the results in 2025 or 2027. Up till then, we don't have any hardcore data of what we need to do in cisplatin ineligible. In TMH also, we are running one study for cisplatin ineligible. Now, can we overcome these criteria of ineligibility? Now, in clinical practice, the criteria of nutrition loss before starting RT can be overcome. In my experience, around 10 to 20% of the patients, if you put on a good nutrition protocol and have a look at them, their weight loss can get reverted back. what you should do in clinical practice, if you find a cisplatin ineligible patient, if you have a study in your institute, please enroll the patient on the study. These patients are quite fragile and they would do better on the study. If no, then choose. If radical patient, and the patient is fit and is cisplatin ineligible. What I mean by fit is he is cisplatin ineligible because he had a hearing loss. The hearing loss was because of a road traffic accident. This patient is perfectly fit for you to give carboplatin 5FU, and hence a certain amount of judgment as a clinician will be required. If the patient is borderline fit, which means that patient has received neoadjuvant chemotherapy, let's say 3 cycles of DCF, and now you need to give more during the concurrent, then according to Trumplin, use cetuximab. You can use like tax 323 for carboplatin in this patient. For rest, I cannot give exact guidance because the data suggests that none of the regimens in cisplatin ineligible patients actually are that safe or are that useful. In adjuvant, again, I would repeat that I cannot give you any evidence-based option or to be used. You can try in fit and ineligible patient, like is overall fit but ineligible for cisplatin, let's say because of slightly lower creatinine clearance or road traffic accident, hearing loss. You can try docetaxel plus cetuximab, but be aware these patients are very fragile. They lead to a lot of toxicities, and whether these regimens benefit in clinical practice, we are not sure. Thank you.